Introduced Argyll, and he's going to talk to us about Gaelic, and he belongs to Charts. Argyll.
I belong to Argyll, but I also belong to Charts. I'm only pulling your leg. There's a couple of different ways that I could introduce myself. Can you hear me okay like that? Is that okay? Aye. So first of all, personally, to introduce myself, I would say, is Misha Agav mach gemish vik, ich gemish vor, ich gerimich, ich gemish, ich vorach, ich gemish. So that's me referencing 7 generations back. And if I'm referencing 7 generations back, then I'm also referencing 7 generations into the future. I'm announcing the fact that I'm going to be a good 7th generation ancestor. So I need to do things now that will echo down those 7 generations. So I'm talking today about living tradition bearing. And I could introduce myself professionally as well. It's Misha Agav Oban. It's Misha Offiger Coulter Gaelic at Charts. So I'm Agav Oban, and I am the Gaelic Culture Officer at Charts. And in a similar fashion to what I did just there referencing my ancestors, when I let you know what my job title is, then I'd like to reference Arlene there in Argyll and Bute Council, Bors na Gaelic, Kathleen, my boss, and everyone at Charts that made my position possible. So I'm almost announcing my kind of work ancestry there. Do you know how my post came about? I'm very grateful for it, because for a long time I was going up and down the road between Glasgow and Lochgilphead, and sometimes to Vialich, and I was recording the last couple of fellas who were conversant, who were able to converse in the local dialect of central Argyll. And the dialect really stretched from Bute to Cowell through Mid-Argyll and Knapdale. And it was a bit of a lonely road. And for years I was sort of trying to make a racket about what I was doing, and I just felt it was really important to record these old fellas who were tradition bearers. And it didn't really feel that anybody was listening. And then just last year I saw this post at Charts come up, and I looked at the job description. You know, it's one of those things you sort of pinch yourself and you go, this can't be real, you know. They're actually wanting me to come into this job and get paid for doing what I already do. Wait a minute, you know. As it happened, that's exactly the way it has transpired. So as with any job, my job at Charts as Gaelic Culture Officer involves all kinds of different strands. It involves implanting language throughout the organisation, through everything that we do where appropriate. It involves working directly with the council, with another great person, Christy Moore, who is the kind of works on communities things at Argyll and Bute Council, and I'm working on the cultural side of things in terms of the language. And it also means making the Gaelic language and culture available to our membership, because we are primarily a membership-led organisation. And who wants to know more about Charts, we can talk to myself or Muriel, there, my colleague, afterwards, or Kathleen O'Neill, our boss, the boss woman, said you're more than welcome to email her directly if you get any questions about the organisation, how it operates. So to get back to this idea of living tradition bearing, and especially as regards my post at Charts, finding myself operating voluntarily, and I was paying for my fuel to get up and down the road, Glasgow to Lochgilphead, and going to visit a lot of older folk in Cowell as well, who maybe didn't have as much of the language, but were full of anecdotes and memories and traditions. I managed to do that basically by private donation. I had a wee PayPal account, and well-meaning people who were interested in the culture of the area would just pop enough in to pay for my fuel, you know, and a wee sandwich or whatever, you know, on the road. And that's how I was doing it for over a decade. And it was very rewarding, because I got to spend time with the best people on the planet. You know, our elders are where it's at, as far as I'm concerned. So that obviously incredibly rewarding. However, there comes a point where you start getting worn down with these things, and you feel that you need the structures that a well-run organisation can provide. So that is what Charts has done for me. It's allowed me to bring this passion in, and it's allowed me to bring this sense of living tradition bearing in, learning from generations before me, taking the anecdotes, stories, songs, proverbs, local history, all that side of things, and embodying it and living it and talking about it constantly and referencing these things in conversation, not just recording people so that the stuff can be placed into archives, and everybody loves a good archive. Where would a man like myself be without Tober and Doachish, the Kiss the Riches? Who knows? Where would I be without the School of Scottish Studies archive or Alison's archive at Inverera? I would be lost. Everybody needs a good archive. But what I think is especially important, and Eleanor, of course, basically covered everything I'm saying already, but I'm trying to fill in some strategic blanks, The idea for me is, both within my job and personally, is to embody this tradition by, as I say, living it and implanting it in everything I do. So how would I go about promoting this idea then through my work? Have I not got the extra 5 minutes in? No, oh no! Oh, you're joking. Here. Right, wait a minute. How do I get the last 5 minutes into a minute? So how would I encourage this? How would I promote this? Well, it is about empowering people to do what we've all really been talking about. And I just realised very encouragingly that in our smaller groups we have been talking about this all day. Both Alison and Ellen have referenced this strongly, and I would do so again. It's about empowering people to actually understand the fact that they already are tradition bearers. Now, people think that small phrases or facts or bits and pieces that they picked up from their granny, it's just old hoary stuff that nobody really cares about. But actually these things are part of a living continuum, and when you touch that continuum, it's almost like touching a vein. It's like brings you back to the crucible of your people, wherever your people come from. And whether you're a Gael or a blow-in Gael like me, my Gaels are from elsewhere, but I get brought up in Argyll, or you're not from Argyll at all, it's neither here nor there. It's about picking up traditions that look like they're going to disappear out of being and grabbing hold of them and treating them as sacred, and actually living them and breathing them and introducing them into conversations and helping them to be embodied in the work of organisations, and just getting it everywhere and treating it as the sacred thing that it is. So that's my job as far as I see it, and empowering people and helping people to do that. And I believe it's your job too. So with that, I'll finish off. Right. On the picture there was myself, and we had a visit from a Mohawk family 2 or 3 years ago. So they're in a very similar situation.
Modern time. Next we have Cathy Craig, who is wild about Argyll.
Thanks, Anne. I'm very conscious you might throw the laptop at me if I go on for more than 5 minutes, so I'll make it quick. So, Argyll and the Isles Tourism Cooperative was our formal name. If you don't know us, we're the body responsible for the strategic marketing of Argyll and the Isles destination. We are enabled by funding from Argyll and Bute Council. We're also a membership organisation, like any agency trying to survive beyond funding. And latterly, we've been enabled by Highlands and Islands funding as well. So what's my job then? So my job is to help bring visitors to the area and give them a sense of place, and that's where heritage comes in. A sense of place is one of the key reasons why anybody goes anywhere on holiday to experience something. And in the tourism sector, we talk a lot about an authentic experience. What does that authentic experience mean? Well, the trick for conveying how fabulous Argyll and the Isles is as a destination is it means something different to every visitor that comes to us. So, sense of place is it's the intangible and the tangible. It is visiting a castle or reading the history or having a look at the archives. But it's also, we were just talking at our table, when I look at the Cows of Bute, which is one of my favourite viewpoints, and the point I fell in love with Argyll and the Isles and moved my family to live here, It's about how the waterway enabled the history of the area and the connections and allowed people to move from one place to another. So it's all around us, and the trick for me and everyone in the room, because I'm going to say tourism is everybody's job as well, is how we, and I'm going to use Alison's phrase because it really resonated with me, how do we enable visitors to access it? And access it in a way that's meaningful for them. So we work with different groups. So we work with travel trade, so tour operators who might have a very specific historical interest. But how do we get, let's call them ordinary visitors, just so it's easier to describe. How do we get them to connect to a sense of place through heritage? And that's everybody's job. And it's through our food, it's through our built heritage, it's through our culture, it's through the ceilidhs, it's through the stories that they hear. And how do we connect those experiences? So when you are maybe enjoying the local provenance, that you hear about the history of the area, so we connect experiences. Those experiences, if we think about it in this way, if we give our visitor an amazing, immersive, heritage-based experience, they will go home and they will tell others. And they will inspire those people to come and visit. So that's why everybody's job is tourism, as well as protecting our heritage. So the key role for me, for everybody in this room, is to think about different ways in which we allow and enable and inspire visitors to connect with heritage in a way that's important to them, to then pass it on, to inspire others, and to enable them to access it in a way that's meaningful for them, and create that connection of that sense of place that will bring them back and bring others back as well to enjoy and spend money in the local area, which in its own right means towns and villages thrive, which means heritage continues. I hope that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And next we've got Mike Shaw. And Mike Shaw has spent a long time as really a leading light in the Scottish Slate Islands Heritage Trust. So let me move your slide on, Mike. There you go. Right, and your 5 minutes starts now.
Okay. I'll try and do it at the double. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you very much for allowing me a minute or so to talk about heritage and the Slate Islands Heritage Trust. We date from the 1990s when 4 residents of Easdale became convinced they were great supporters of what was then very well known and admired Easdale Island Folk Museum. But they became convinced that a museum could serve a much bigger audience and a much wider audience if it were situated on Seal, no need for a ferry, and if it concentrated on all the Slate Islands instead of just one. So they recruited trustees from Seal, Easdale Island, Ling and Belnahur. Strange thing is Belnahur is uninhabited, but we got the owner. And in 1999, they formed the Scottish Slate Islands Heritage Trust. Local generosity provided us with a building that we could rent cheaply and acquire at very, very favourable terms. And a number of locals donated very modest sums of money. But the 4 founders, of which I'm not one, transformed entirely, really, with their own labour, a quarrier's cottage in Eleanor Bay on the Seal, that part of Seal which we normally call Easdale, as is distinct from Easdale Island. And they had a very good mix of abilities, these four founders, including some academic. When setting up the trust and deciding what would go into this museum, the question, what is heritage, came up quite a lot. And I have to say, we never really resolved it. But I think we got by with what I would describe as a liberal and pragmatic approach. And I think we probably ask ourselves the question, what evidence of the past is available to us? How has it influenced the present? And how much of it is left? What can you see of it in the present? And how much of it can we present, and how best can we present it to the public? These founders, I say, had a good background, a broad background, and some of them were quite academic. And they were very rigorous in demanding high quality and accuracy from everything that went into the museum. There have never been any employees. Everything is done by volunteers. So for 23 years, this band of volunteers has worked away and established a very good little project. The amazing thing is that these volunteers who just walk in the door, they've embarked on some real gems of research, incredible depth, incredible effort, and collected extraordinary items of evidence, and really turned spotlights on all sorts of aspects. But it's entirely driven by their own peculiar and personal, what would I call them? Not necessarily obsessions, that's a bit rude, but people do get completely tied up in the subject. And they've been passions, that's a good word. And they've been very generous with the way they've donated all their work to the museum. I think that all this demonstrates something which is demonstrated by a huge number of the heritage organisations in Argyll and Bute. I think it shows the value of the individual and the pragmatic and the liberal, valuing mutual help. And this organisation obviously is a good example of that. Maintaining standards, but not standardisation. I think it's an example of how small can actually be very beautiful, but very hard work and rather fragile. But it can be very, very beautiful, and I think it's a big part of what we do, and I think we would be the poorer if all the little minnows were to find themselves combined into a small number of large fish. I think that would be a very different thing. And there is a great job done by all the plethora of little organisations. More power to our elbows, I think. I hope that's been some use. Thank you very much, everyone, and come and see us.